Will you address a couple of the major issues that Roone faced while...
Well, he was a one-armed paper hanger that day. We not only had the show that we were doing, there were two items that came up. If you remember what happened that day, and you'll see it in the film, we were given a deadline of noon on September 5. They were going to start killing the hostages 1 per hour if the appropriate trade in hostages was not made with the Israelis. And so we were on deadline. Well, Marvin Bader, as soon as we knew about that deadline, Marvin came in and said, guys, we don't have the bird at noon. And I thought, oh my God, because you book the bird, as everybody here knows, years ahead of time. So for whatever reason, that was a slow day, and we had not booked the bird for noon. So Arledge gets up, goes into his office right around the corner down the hall, and he was really into that discussion, okay? That was not an easy one. Secondly, as that was happening, he was getting an enormous amount of pressure from ABC News in New York to hand it over, this coverage, to them. As well, if you were the head of ABC News, you might want to have happened. And Roone was not about to let that happen. But it wasn't like Roone was not yet the president of ABC News. This was when he was still in sports. So it wasn't like Roone was able to say, not going to happen. Nope, it was a negotiation. So he had his hands full for several hours while he danced around how to do this show.
You know, I'd like to ask you, Sean, because you're in a unique position in that only Roone Arledge and you were the president of both sports and news. Do you think that would have been a debate in your own mind?
It could have been. Fortunately, if it happened between 2005 and 2011, I could have had the conversation with myself because I had both jobs. Yeah, I think certainly with the worldwide reach that news organizations have now, which is drastically different than it was in 1972, I think the news people could probably make a pretty good case of why they should take over the coverage. But as Geoffrey said, Roone was, I mean, it was a non-starter. He took control and he kept control until 4 o'clock in the morning. And I think what was really, an interesting part of this story is that I don't think, as the events unfolded, that anybody in that control room knew the magnitude of what they were doing around the world. There were 900 million people around the world watching the ABC Sports coverage of this tragic event.
But I want to, I guess this is in defense. This is my 50th year as a sports journalist. And I always say, Walter Cronkite covered sports. Dan Rather was a minor league baseball play-by-play. You know, Sean, you sent me to the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, I covered people in sports can cover anything. Well,
I'll tell you, Sean mentions a really important point. We did not really understand the broad scope of our coverage, which you just identified, until a couple of days later, Jim showed Sean, me, and several others a telegram that he had just received.
Yeah, actually, not to correct my former boss, Geoffrey Mason, but it was actually the morning of, it was when
so I was off a day, come on.
Nothing happened.
No, he went back to his, we went back together to the Munich Sheraton. It was 4:15 in the morning by the time we got there. And my dad asked for his key from the front desk, and the concierge handed him a telegram. And my dad was obviously exhausted. He opened it up, and I'm going to have to paraphrase, but the telegram said, Jim, you were superb yesterday. You and the industry have reason to be proud. Congratulations, Walter Cronkite. And I think at that moment, for the first time, my dad actually thought, oh my gosh, what have we just done? What is the impact of what we've done? And if I could just tell one other short story, the ABC Sports team got a list of the Israeli athletes and coaches who were being held hostage. One of them was a young man named David Berger, who was American but emigrated to Israel, so he was an Israeli weightlifter on the Israeli team. My dad did some research and found out that his parents lived in Shaker Heights, Ohio. So throughout the day and night and early morning hours, he understood that Mr. and Mrs. David Berger were going to find out if their son was dead or alive through my father's words. And I think that you can imagine how much that weighed on him, knowing that this poor family in Shaker Heights. So when my dad finally gives the news, and I know we'll talk about those words later, but when he finally gives the news that all the Israelis have been killed, in the back of his mind were Mr. and Mrs. Berger in Shaker Heights, Ohio.